Lee Whitmore, welcome to our Ojai Film Festival animation panel. And
Okay, thank you, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be part of it.
Oh, and I'm so in love with your film. It's a little hard to say, Sohrab and Rustam.
That's it. Well, that's how I say it, Sohrab and Rustam. Yes.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
I just love your film, and I love all your work, by the way. I'm a fan.
Oh, well, it's nice to know.
But let's talk about this one to start with. Would you like to tell us how you came to decide to make this animated film?
Well, yeah, sure. This film, Sohrab and Rustam, is based on a Persian legend, and it's based also on a poem about the Persian legend that was written by a Victorian Englishman, Matthew Arnold, who's quite famous in poetry circles. So my teacher, Mrs. Wanger, her name was a very inspiring, wonderful teacher. And she was very kind of outrageous and kind of teacher that girls absolutely love at the time. She was very strict and you always had to do what she said, but she was inspiring. And I've remembered her reading of the poem, and which we did in class, and the poem itself ever since. And so, as you probably guessed, looking at my other work, all my films are autobiographical in some way. There's a connection to me, personal connection. So this one is no different, really. And I was very lucky because I've managed to find my old teacher again, who's now 80-something, Mrs. Wanger. And I reconnected with her and I got her to read the poem. So the voice actually in the film is of my 80-plus-year-old teacher, Mrs. Wanger, Patricia Wanger. And she was really pleased to do it, and she did it really seriously. And I felt very honored and lucky to have found her. She lives in Canberra, which is a kind of a fair way from Sydney. But I did find her, and we went down and we recorded her voice. So that was the first. Several lucky breaks happened with this film and being able to make it in the way that it has been made. So, and the other was, you know, it's got a fight sequence in it, old Persian fight sequence. And I thought, oh, you know, I'm an animator, but I'm not, you know, I don't know how a fight scene. I couldn't conduct a fight if my life depended on it. So I managed to find a group of people in Sydney who run a fight school, and they choreographed it for me. And it turned out that the two guys that did the choreographing were perfect role models for Sohrab and Rustam. So the younger one is, of course, Sohrab, and the older one is Rustam, and he was the boss of the school. But they took it really seriously, and we did lots of practice sessions, and then we recorded it. And so the drawings that I've done are based largely on rotoscoping the work that these two guys did for me. So the sequences, I think, are fantastic. And I've again, you know, two lucky breaks, yet, you know, helped me make the film.
Yeah.
Got me started, that's for sure. So it's all drawing. You want me to just keep rattling on?
Well, it's drawing and it's watercolors, which...
It is watercolors too. The watercolors sort of came into it later when I started kind of using the footage that I've got of the fight scene. I also rotoscoped my daughter, who plays the teacher, because my daughter's young and I think sexy. And because I wanted to do the corridor shot at the beginning where she walks down towards the kids at the end of the corridor, and she was kind of famous for having a good wiggly walk. So the corridor shot is the opening sequence of her walking, and she, you know, wore heels and short skirts. At the time, you know, we're talking a long time ago. It was quite something. So my daughter modelled for Mrs. Wanger, and the two boys modelled for Sohrab and Rustam. So, and the rest, I guess, I made up the girls, my memories of the girls. I did some research on who all the girls were and what they looked like, and, you know, kind of fleshed out my my memory of the time. But so in the film, I do know who all the girls are that you see in the shots, and have since reconnected with them too. So the whole thing has been a bit of a process of reconnecting with that time in my life. So yes, I do use drawings. I can show you a couple. I'll pull them over.
Thank you. Love it. Love it.
So this is the corridor shot. You can
Oh,
see
that's beautiful. Yeah, up a little higher. Yeah, that's perfect. That's fine. Perfect. You're perfect. Right there.
So that's the corridor. So it's pencil with a bit of colored pencil on top. And you can see this kind of size I'm working. It's quite large.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite large.
All that 16 field in the United States.
Yeah, 15, 16 field, somewhere there. That's right. And so these are the girls, group of the girls in the
beginning. Wonderful.
So you get an idea of the kind of
opening. Oh, the opening shot.
Yeah, so all my films use drawing. Drawing and painting is basically my oeuvre, I suppose.
Yeah, you do hand-drawn animation.
Hand-drawn, that's right. Hand-drawn. And then let's put this over. So this is one of the watercolors that you see towards the end.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
And when you did the animation of the watercolors, you did that under the camera?
I did this directly under the camera, yes.
It's an animated sequence in watercolor, if people understand.
Yes,
and shooting and painting right live under the camera.
Yes, and it looked even brighter and more brilliant because, you know, if you've used watercolors, you know, when they're wet, they look the most beautiful, really. Yeah. And then they dry, and it's dried a bit darker, but it still looks, you know, this is up. So as I'm pushing the watercolor around and adding little sparkles of light, it was fun. That part of the process felt like not so much like work. It was watercolor was lovely to do. Yeah, and that's the first time I've used watercolors as a kind of animation technique. I mean, previous films I've worked in oil on glass, paint on glass, oil paints. The first film, most of it uses drawing somewhere along the line. Yeah, it's all drawing. Drawing's my basic skill.
Yes, so this was your first watercolor. I didn't realize that because your other films have so much painting in it. I didn't think about that.
Yes, yes.
Watercolor.
Yeah, painting, or the second one had a lot of pastel sequences of on a full moon, if you remember watching that, has sequences on a river, and they're all done in pastel.
Oh, okay.
So they're, yeah, this is the first watercolor, yeah. Okay.
Well, I love your films. Each one I like. That one's my favorite. No, that one's my favorite. No, that one's my favorite. It depends if it's Monday. I like that one the best.
Oh, thank you. That's nice.
You really touched me.
Yeah.
Your hard work in animating. So much is.
Yeah.
So much.
Well, they're all. The only one that was kind of. They've all been helped along by the government with some funding, which I have to say has since dried up. And Sorab and Rustum I made. Using Kickstarter, so that has been, people have put money in to help me finish that film, and I'm doing one now that there's no government money for that, so it's got harder and harder to be an independent animator here. I expect it's the same all around the world.
Yeah, we in the US we don't get funded much at all for independent. No. Like outside of the US, it's always better.
Always better. Well, it's probably the same now as it is in the US. So I'm trying to fund quite a long one at the moment. So I'll probably have to go to Kickstarter again.
A long film? More?
Well, it's as long as Sorab and Rustum. For me, that's a long film. The longest film I've done, of course, is The Safe House. That was 26 minutes. That's the longest I've done.
That's long, yeah.
It is long for one person, yes.
Oh my God, you did it. Oh, I forgot. You did it yourself.
They're all single efforts, yes.
I hope people realize how hard that is. We thank you so much and hope another time you can come. We can have our festival in Ojai and you can...
Yes, I hope I can actually come. That would be really sweet, wouldn't it? Okay, well, I hope it goes really well for you and you get hundreds and thousands of people.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, nice to take care.
All the best.
Okay, you too. Okay, bye-bye.
And the first grey of morning filled the east, and the fog rose out of Oxus stream. But all the Tartar camp along the stream was hushed, and still the men were plunged in sleep. Sorab alone he slept not. All night long he'd lain wakeful, tossing on his bed, but when the grey dawn stole into his tent he rose, and clad himself and girt his sword, and took his horseman's cloak, and left his tent, and went abroad into the cold wet fog, through the dim camp to Perenweese's tent. Thou know'st me, Perenweese, it is I, and I will tell thee what my heart desires. I seek one man, and one alone, Rustum, my father, who I hoped should one day greet upon some well-fought field his not unworthy, not inglorious son. So I long hoped, but him I never find. Come then, hear now, and grant me what I ask. Let the two armies rest today, but I will challenge forth the bravest Persian lords to meet me man to man. If I prevail, Rustum will surely hear it. If I fall, old man, the dead need no one, claim no kin. And the old Tartar came upon the sand betwixt the silent hosts, and spake and said, Persians and Tartars hear, let there be truce between the hosts today, but choose a champion from the Persian lords to fight our champion Sorab, man to man. And Rustum came upon the sand and cast his eyes towards the Tartar tents, and saw Sorab come forth, and eyed him as he came. For would that I myself had such a son, and not that one slight helpless girl I have, a son so famed, so brave, to send to war. So slender Sorab seemed, so softly reared, and a deep pity entered Rustum's soul as he beheld him coming, and he stood and beckoned to him with his hand and said, O thou young man, the air of heaven is soft and warm and pleasant, but the grave is cold. Sorab heard his voice, the mighty voice of Rustum, and he saw his giant figure planted on the sand, and he ran forward and embraced his knees, and clasped his hand within his own, and said, O by thy father's head, by thine own soul, art thou not Rustum? Speak, art thou not he? But Rustum eyed askance the kneeling youth. Ah me, I muse what this young fox may mean. Rise. Wherefore dost thou vainly question thus of Rustum? I am here, whom thou hast called by challenge forth. Make good thy vaunt, or yield. Art thou so fierce? Thou wilt not fright me so. I am no girl to be made pale by words.
Begin.
Thou sayest thou art not Rustum, be it so. Who art thou then that can so touch my soul? and you would say that sun and stars took part in that unnatural conflict. For a cloud grew suddenly in heaven and darkened the sun over the fighters' heads, and a wind rose under their feet, and moaning swept the plain, and in a sandy whirlwind wrapped the pair. In gloom they twain were wrapped, and they alone. For both the onlooking hosts on either hand stood in broad daylight, and the sky was pure, and the sun sparkled on the Oxus stream. Then Rustum raised his head, his dreadful eyes glared, and he shook on high his menacing spear and shouted, "Rustum!" Sohrab heard that shout and shrank amazed. Back he recoiled one step and scanned with blinking eyes the advancing form, and then he stood bewildered, and he dropped his covering shield, and the spear pierced his side. He reeled and, staggering back, sank to the ground. So Sohrab lay, lovely in death upon the common sand. And Rustum gazed on him with grief and said, "O Sohrab, thou indeed art such a son whom Rustum, wert thou his, might well have loved. Yet here thou errest, Sohrab, or else men have told thee false. Thou art not Rustum's son. The mighty Rustum never had a son." And with failing voice Sohrab replied, "Ah, yes he had, and that lost son am I. I tell thee, pricked upon this arm I bear that seal which Rustum to my mother gave, that she might prick it on the babe she bore." "O boy, thy father," and his voice choked there, and then a dark cloud passed before his eyes. So on the bloody sand Sohrab lay dead, and the great Rustum drew his horseman's cloak down o'er his face, and sat by his dead son. And night came down over the solemn waste and the two gazing hosts and that sole pair, and darkened all, and a cold fog with night crept from the Oxus. Soon a hum arose as of a great assembly loosed, and fires began to twinkle through the fog. For now both armies moved to camp and took their meal. The Persians took it on the open sand southward, the Tartars by the river marge, and Rustum and his son were left alone. But the majestic river floated on, out of the mist and hum of that low land, into the frosty starlight, and there moved rejoicing through the hushed Chorasmian waste, under the solitary moon. He flowed right for the polar star past Orgunje, brimming and bright at large. Then sands begin to hem his watery march, and dam his streams, and split his currents, that for many a league the shorn and parcelled Oxus strains along through beds of sand and matted rushy isles. Oxus, forgetting the bright speed he had in his high mountain cradle in Pamir, a foiled, circuitous wanderer, till at last the longed-for dash of waves is heard, and wide his luminous home of waters opens, bright and tranquil, from whose floor the new-bathed stars emerge and shine upon the Aral Sea.